As Catholics, we're called to educate ourselves about ballot measures and the policies and agendas that candidates support. But does our faith translate at the polls? We're joined now by Barbara Sella, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Catholic Conference, and Jennifer Allmon, the Executive Director of the Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops, to talk more about the outcome of the 2022 midterm elections and whether Catholic voters made an impact. Thank you both for joining us today. Barbara, fewer than 100,000 voters gave the Democrats a win for governor, and under 30,000 gave the Republicans a Senate win in Wisconsin. What was the impact of voting Catholics?
Well, the first thing I want to say is we had a very, very high turnout, and of course, there's no real way of knowing how Catholics voted. But what I can tell you is that Wisconsinites often will split their ballots. This was brought up recently by the former House Speaker Paul Ryan, who is from Wisconsin, and he noted that when he would win re-election, very often Democratic Senator Ross Feingold would also win his race. So this is typical of our electorates. In Wisconsin, Catholics are about a little less than 23% or around 23% of the voting population, and about 41% describe themselves as conservative and another 42% as moderate. So there's a split there. But again, I want to stress that it is not uncommon for people to vote in both parties. And given that our Catholic social teaching cannot neatly be, fit into one political party or another, I would expect that many Catholics must have split their ballot.
That's very interesting to know that it's not unusual, but also that it allows people to be primarily Catholic and secondarily political, which is always a good thing. Jennifer, voters in Texas re-elected Republican Greg Abbott for governor, who has drawn a hard line on immigration, but rejected Mayra Flores, who drew similar lines. You've been on the forefront of the church's work with immigrants. Will the church's efforts change or remain the same?
Oh, our efforts will absolutely remain the same. We remain committed to Catholic teaching on migration, which is, of course, that people have a right to migrate, but that sovereign nations have a right to protect and secure their border. And so the bishops engage in a variety of ways. And I think you'll continue to see our ministries flourish and provide assistance as needed.
And have the elections in any way changed what you're able to do?
No.
That's good to hear. Barbara, Wisconsin is right, not far from Canada, a country that has passed a great many progressive policies, including legalizing abortion at all stages of pregnancy, and also legalizing assisted suicide and gender transition treatments for minors. Is that mindset bleeding down into Wisconsin?
I'm glad you asked that question, in part because I lived in Canada for 8 years. So I'm very interested in what is happening up there. I would say that there are, first of all, some of the things that you mentioned are happening globally, right? But I would say that the Canadian political system is quite different from ours. We have a much stronger system of checks and balances than Canadians do. We have stronger protections for free speech and religious freedom than Canadians do. So while it is very concerning what's happening in Canada, I really don't think that the advance and the extremism that is found there is likely to prevail in the United States. And then the other advantage that we have is that we can watch what's happening in Canada and learn from that. And adjust accordingly.
Is the diminished role of the church in Canada also, and the secularism there, also a factor?
Absolutely, yeah.
Jennifer, most of the votes in Texas were Republican, but there's a growing Democrat population, some easily attributed to moves during COVID lockdowns. How will that impact issues of importance to Catholics on the ballot?
It's hard to say. There's a strong Republican majority in the Texas House and Senate, and of course, all the statewide offices are Republicans. So, in all three in the House and Senate, they've increased the Republican margin. So, Democrats turning out in more numbers this session didn't really have an impact. For example, Governor Abbott won by 13 points or 11 points this time, and he won by 13 points last time. So it was only a 2 percentage point difference in Democrat turnout. That doesn't really translate to much of a difference in bills filed at the legislature. We do have a few unique bipartisan examples of legislation that we work on, and I am encouraged by some of the bipartisan conversations around the death penalty and around support for walking with moms in need. So I do think we're going to have some good conversations on those two topics in a very bipartisan manner,
which needs to be modeled for the rest of the country. Barbara, you talked about the voter turnout and increased voter turnout. What tools does the church have to educate voters and inspire them to go to the polls?
Yes, so every election, the Wisconsin bishops issue a joint letter to Wisconsin Catholics, urging them to become informed about Catholic social teaching and to take very seriously their responsibility to be faithful citizens and to take part in elections. They also stress, however, that the real work occurs after the election, right? Then the letter is accompanied by a brief summary of Catholic social teaching, materials that can be placed in church bulletins and in the diocesan papers. And then, of course, the bishops also usually write a column for their own diocesan papers. So there's a lot of work that goes on educating Catholics about what our church teaches and how it's all interconnected. And just to pick up on something Jennifer said, we as Catholics are able to straddle both sides. We're able to be the bridge builders, and we are able to work on bipartisan legislation. So we are very excited here in Wisconsin that the new session coming up, it is divided government, but we're really hoping to bring both sides to the table and pass things in particular that will help women and children, following the lead of the U.S. bishops and their Walking with Moms in Need initiative.
Where Catholics are really going to need to take a leadership role. Jennifer, is anything different? Are there more resources, less resources to educate voters in Texas?
I don't know if I would characterize it about the resources for educating voters. I think there's a lot of engagement by the citizens and the public, and I think that's always positive.
And are the bishops doing anything in particular that's different?
I think they're continuing on the usual work and the usual issues. We're bringing back our large advocacy day. We do an advocacy day at the Capitol where about 5,000 Catholics come and speak to the full issues of the church. And we suspended it last session due to COVID. And so the bishops are really excited to bring their people back. So that'll be really fun this year.
Well, we'll look forward to that and also looking to see what else comes up in a post-COVID world. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.